Number 10. Pax Americana. Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely created the multiversity Pax Americana in 2014, and DC Comics fans were mostly baffled. As part of the Multiversity series of books, different universes based on companies purchased by DC Comics were explored in their own stories. This one focused on Earth 4, which is based around the Charlton Comics heroes of Pax Americana, hence the name. We saw characters like Peacemaker, The Question, Blue Beetle, and all that fun stuff, but in a story that almost seemed like a mirror of the Watchmen story with the Charlton characters standing in. The story was also told basically in reverse, but also not really. Ultimately, it all revolves around the president that formed the Pax Americana and the mystery of whatever happened to America's first crime fighter. It's worth a read for sure, and after the initial read through, when you're confused about what's going on, I would maybe look up a guide on how to read it properly and try again. Number 9. Carol and Marcus. This one is not only confusing, but it's a little disturbing too, which I think might also help to make it even more confusing in the long run. So basically, in Avengers 197 from 1980, Carol Danvers, back when she was Miss Marvel, discovers that she is pregnant. She doesn't remember how it happened, and that sweet baby is growing quick. Not 3 issues later, in Avengers 200, Carol pops the little sucker out within days of even finding out she's pregnant. All the Avengers are weirdly excited about it, and they treat Carol like she's the unreasonable one for not being excited. The baby, who has been named Marcus, then grows up into adulthood in basically hours, and reveals that he is actually the son of Immortus, the ruler of Limbo, and one of the different incarnations of Kang the Conqueror. Immortus had Marcus with a woman that he had apparently plucked out of time, but Marcus was trapped in Limbo until he could be born again on Earth. So, Marcus had brought Carol Danvers to Limbo, romanced her with a combination of charm and quote subtle manipulation, and he got Miss Marvel pregnant so that he could be born on Earth. The fact that they then go on to explore the romance before it was retconned is one thing, but it honestly makes absolutely no sense, and it's confusing as hell. Number 8. Legion. David Haller was living in Paris with his mother when her home was invaded by a assassination team. They took out David's stepfather before his eyes, which kicked off his latent psionic powers, which he used to incinerate the brains out of the assassins. However, as he did so, he made telepathic contact with each of his victims, thus experiencing their thoughts and emotions as they died, which, as you can imagine, deeply affected David, forcing him into a catatonic state. The consciousness of the leader of the assassins, Jamail Karami, was absorbed and merged into David's mind. The terrible trauma that David had suffered had splintered David's personality into multiple alters, with each of these alters controlling a different psionic power. Because of this, Legion is an Omega level mutant able to create spontaneous mutations of different kinds that are accompanied by new personas or alter egos to govern each one of these new mutations. Now, David himself stated that he had in his mind 200 Omega level split personalities, but the X-Men Rogue stated that while she was inside Legion, she was connected to thousands of types of powers, and there were more, quote, being born all the time. How this works, I have absolutely no idea, but it does, and he is scary. Number 7. Clone Saga. It's hard to know where to start with the Clone Saga. The simplest place is with Ben Reilly, also known as the Scarlet Spider. Ben is the clone of Peter from the 70s, finally returned. The original plan for the character was to reveal that he was actually Peter himself, and that the Peter fans knew was the clone. The idea was for Peter to step away from the role of Spider-Man and give it to the true Peter Parker so that the clone Peter could focus on his life with Mary Jane. And if that doesn't confuse you, then buckle up, because that didn't even happen, because Ben Reilly said no to becoming Spider-Man twice. And then, to keep fan interest going in the series, the writers started introducing more and more clones, like Kane, who was actually pretty cool, and Spider-Side, who was like a big tanky Spider-Man who kind of sucked. But then even more clones were created on top of that, even an entire army of them, and it resulted in far too many spin-off stories. On top of all of that, Marvel also introduced the characters of Judas Traveler and his buddy, I guess, the Scryer, and neither of them did anything except say some ominous stuff that never resulted in anything. There is Gaunt also, who was introduced to confuse Peter, which evidently confused us all more, and then, right at the very end, it was revealed that the mastermind behind the entire ordeal was Norman Osborn, who had not been connected to the story in any way up to that point, and that's because he had been passed away since the 70s. Do you see? Do you see the issue here? It's confusing. Number 6. Final Crisis. Final Crisis, which wasn't really even the Final Crisis. For the Final Crisis, there are a few things that just make it confusing as heck. For starters, it was written by Grant Morrison. Basically, the story sees Darkseid invade the Earth. That's normal, but it's when the anti-life equation becomes involved that things just go all over the place. In the build-up to Final Crisis, Morrison gave DC a very rough outline of the book so they could do a build-up, but they had their own ideas on what the book should be, so they tailored the build-up to what they thought Final Crisis should be, and Morrison completely ignored everything that DC just did. So the build-up is basically useless. The 7 issues that make up the actual story are very hard to follow with the perspective of the story and which characters are involved, jumping from panel to panel and page to page. There are so many characters involved, some of which are hella obscure or are returning with no explanation, like Barry Allen. I mean, Superman defeats the villain in the end by singing. That's what we're dealing with here. It's weird. Number 5. Generations. The DC Elseworld stories are some of my favorite ones because largely the stories are self-contained, but it doesn't mean they can't be convoluted. Elseworlds Generations is a great example. Generations basically gets rid of the idea of comic book time, following Batman and Superman's first appearances in the 1930s and then onward in real time. The two heroes basically remain unchanged throughout time, which makes sense for Superman, but for the Dark Knight, he exists forever because he essentially becomes the immortal Ra's al Ghul. It's not too bad, but it's in the 3rd arc of the series, Generations 3, things get really wacky. Centuries pass between each of the 12 issues in the arcs, which is confusing enough if you aren't prepared for it. But then, in the final issues, that's when Darkseid invades and time travel rears its nice convoluted head. In the final battle, Batman and Superman are transported back to the 1930s and the first issues from Generations number 1. When the day is finally saved, Supes and Batman lose almost all of their memories and start all over again. Basically, Generations is one big convoluted circle. Number 4. Donna Troy. So, some of the entries on this list won't be so much about single storylines, but even the stories of some comic book characters in whole, particularly those who seem to have multiple different lives. For example, Donna Troy. Donna, like Wonder Woman, has several different origin stories, but while Diana's many beginnings are pretty similar to one another in a lot of ways, the story behind Donna gets more puzzling with each retcon. Donna has been an orphan found and raised on Themyscira as Diana's younger sister, and then she was changed to a creation from part of Wonder Woman's soul, and then she even became a young mirror image clone of Wonder Woman herself. In the pre-Flashpoint era, Donna got a new origin story that completely changed the previous one pretty much every couple of decades. It was so confusing that the new Teen Titans had a story arc called Who is Donna Troy? From 1988 to 1989 to try and clean everything up, but even that story to clean up the character was retconned. In the end, all the separate threads of Donna finally came together and she was revealed to be an amalgamation of all the Donna Troys across the entire universe thanks to a spell, with all of her origin stories being memories of her other lives. Number 3. Batman No Man's Land. Now, No Man's Land was actually a pretty simple concept. Gotham is struck by an earthquake, and instead of repairing the city, the federal government deems it a lost cause, and they completely give up on the city and cut it off from the rest of the USA. The villains all form gangs and slice up Gotham into different territories, and Batman comes back to try and put Gotham back together again. This crossover event was huge. One of the most ambitious in DC's history. The writers even needed charts and maps to keep track of where everyone was at what time. The story included literally all the Batman and Batman family titles like Batman, Detective Comics, Shadow of the Bat, Legends of the Dark Knight, Robin, Catwoman, and Nightwing. Not to mention how the whole thing really started with the Cataclysm event, followed by the road to No Man's Land before the event itself actually began. It's probably one of the best Batman stories out there, but at the time it came out, this thing was an expensive read if you wanted the entire story from beginning to end and to keep track of all its many moving parts. Number 2. Spider-Man One More Day. One More Day is infamous among Spider-Man fans, and understandably so. The story completely retcons Spider-Man's marriage to Mary Jane Watson out of continuity, which not only peed off a bunch of fans, but also brought up a lot of continuity questions. Marvel editorial made sure to say nothing about the years of stories had actually changed, but just the marriage part actually going through. So basically, this made a bunch of us sit here and wonder, why was Mary Jane still hanging out with the dude who left her high and dry at the altar? This was a relationship that had been built up over literal decades, that had been carried over into the movies, the newspaper strips, every other version of Spider-Man. It was arguably Marvel's best romance, and Marvel just took it away, made it Aunt May's fault, and expected us to believe that of all the villains, Mephisto, who isn't even a real Spider-Man villain, wanted their marriage destroyed in order to save Aunt May, when historically, souls are much more his thing. Number 1. House and Powers of X. Buckle up, because this is long. Jonathan Hickman's X-Men reboot joint stories, the House and Powers of X series, have been, honestly, awesome. But I can't lie, I struggled to follow exactly what was happening. Essentially, these stories established 4 different time periods all at the same time. The first, coming to us in the House of X, begins with Moira McTaggart meeting Charles Xavier and telling him to read her mind to see that she is now, sort of out of nowhere, an immortal time-looping mutant. Every time Moira loses her life, the timeline actually just resets. That's timeline number 1. Now jump forward a decade or so to the present-day Marvel Universe, and Charles has partnered with Magneto and pretty much the entire mutant species to turn the sentient island Krakoa into a mutant paradise. Now, in Powers of X, we go forward about 100 years, with this future becoming one in which Sentinels, led by Nimrod, rose against mutants and mankind again, and the war has all but erased mutants from the entire solar system except for those few outnumbered holdouts still trying to win the day. And then lastly, we get to see Earth 1,000 years into the future, when none of it mattered because aliens or some kind of other advanced species took over the Earth. Now, going back to the 100 years in the future storyline, in the end of Powers of X, a doomed mission by the remaining mutants, led by Apocalypse, to learn the exact date that Nimrod is activated is successful, with Wolverine as the final survivor. It's then revealed that Moira McTaggart is still alive thanks to Apocalypse. Wolverine infuses the retrieved date into her conscious memory, and with the info of the exact day Nimrod doomed us all, Wolverine takes her life, resetting the timeline and actually looping the Powers of X story to lead directly to the start of the House of X story, and timeline number 1, which is actually now the present day main story, with Moira basically giving Xavier all the information to stop the mutant machine human war in the first place. Confused? Then my mission is complete.
At number 10 is Mr. Mxyzptlk. Trust me, Mr. M's abilities are as baffling as they come. This 5th dimensional trickster is a pain in Superman's cape, and his powers, well, they're truly out of this world. Nay, out of this reality. Nay, out of this dimension. See, Mr. Mxyzptlk hails from the 5th dimension, and that's where things get really weird. You see, he wields total control over our good old 3D reality. Picture this. He can bend, twist, and manipulate the fabric of our world like it's Play-Doh. You think you're safe, but then boom, your house is made of candy, or you're suddenly wearing your underwear on the outside. Sort of like the ultimate cosmic prankster. But what's even more mysterious is how Supes manages to deal with him. I mean, how do you outsmart a being who can turn your life into a surreal circus? It's a head scratcher for sure. And number 9 is the High Evolutionary. The High Evolutionary might be a fictional character in the Marvel Universe, but his peculiar powers raise intriguing questions about real-world science. Let's dive into his weird superpower, which is an invention of his known as the Evolutionator. I mean, the Evolutionary Accelerator. Sorry, Dr. Doof. Imagine a machine that could reshape your DNA and turn you into a super being. That's basically what Rocket Raccoon's entire backstory is, without all the sentimental stuff. While it sounds far-fetched, we've seen some elements of genetic engineering in the real world, like CRISPR technology, but achieving High Evolutionary's level of power remains a complete sci-fi mystery. Is there a theoretical limit to how much we can manipulate our genes, and what ethical dilemmas could arise if we reshape our bodies and minds at will? These are the questions that scientists and ethicists still grapple with as we navigate towards the unknown frontiers of genetic engineering. If you're enjoying this video, video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. And number 8 is Darkseid's Omega Beams. Darkseid, the DC Universe's notorious villain, most notorious villain, indeed possesses some fascinating yet perplexing superpowers. And while we're all familiar with his super strength, genius, and invulnerability, it's his Omega Beams that continues to bewilder me. These beams are nothing like anything else in the superhero realm. You see, once Darkseid locks onto a target, those beams won't give up the chase no matter how many twists and turns the target takes. Sort of like a relentless heat-sinking missile, but with a lasery cosmic twist. The Omega Beams can also bring a temporary demise to their victim, turning them into cosmic dust. But the weird part is that Darkseid can bring them back to life, sort of like an undo button. But that's not all. These beams can even act as teleportation devices, whisking someone away to an entirely different location. How the heck do these beams work? I don't know. At number 7, Plastic Man. Plastic Man is often the butt of superhero jokes, but he might soon have his moment in the spotlight with an upcoming movie. But make no mistake, his powers are nothing to scoff at. This guy can do some seriously weird stuff. He's like the ultimate shapeshifter. He can transform his body into any shape, size, or density he wants. Think of turning into a liquid ooze to squeeze through tight spaces, or becoming as solid as rock. And he's not just about appearances. He can mimic other people's faces perfectly. But the weirdest part of it all, that probably has nothing to do with his plasticity powers, is that he's telepathy proof, meaning you can't mess with his mind. And if that's not strange enough, in one Justice League story, he found himself alive 3,000 years in the future because he'd scattered his molecules at the bottom of the ocean. Okay, that's a head scratcher. At number 6 is Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel's got quite the power set if you ask me. First off, we've got telekinesis. You know, the power to move stuff around with your mind. How can someone manipulate objects without touching them? It's all about unforeseen forces or maybe some untapped potential locked away in her brain. Then at one point she had time manipulation. Pausing, rewinding, or fast forwarding might sound like science fiction, but who knows? Maybe there is a way to play with time that we're not aware of yet. I mean, I guess we'll find out soon. Superpowers like Captain Marvel's might just be out there in the cosmos, but these weird abilities bring a whole new level of mind-blowing to the table. Who knows what other incredible powers are waiting to be discovered in her vast universe of possibilities. At number 5 is Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan may be a little bit socially inept considering he already knows where the conversation is going, but his superpowers are out of this world. He's basically the Superman of the Watchmen universe, only without the cape and charisma, and even more insanely powerful. The dude attained his powers after he was ripped apart molecule by molecule and had to rebuild his body from scratch, so he's completely indestructible and impervious to harm. In fact, he can disintegrate and reassemble himself in the blink of an eye, or even manifest clones of himself spontaneously. But it gets weirder. He can teleport anywhere, which would make your daily commute a breeze. But what's most intriguing is that he could see across time, living in the present, past, and future simultaneously. So he has all the answers. On top of that, he's got telekinesis, and he can take a stroll on the sun, turn you into dust with a mere thought, and even create life. So while he might not be the life of the party, Dr. Manhattan is undeniably the ultimate superhero powerhouse that nobody understands. And number 4 is Mojo. The X-Men's answer to Jabba the Hutt is actually one of the most powerful in the entire X-Men franchise. Seriously. This tubby tyrant is like the mutant version of a couch potato gone wild. First off, Mojo's got this gnarly flying platform that's decked out with lasers. Yeah, you heard me right, lasers. He's like the king of a futuristic skate park, but with deadly beams instead of kickflips. He's also immune to Rogue's knockout touch, which is no joke. Even Captain Marvel couldn't handle that. But here's the kicker, Mojo's craziness is all thanks to centuries of electronic waves. Sort of like he's been binge watching TV for centuries and now he's gone completely bonkers. At number 3 are the Infinity Stones. We all know that the combined might of the 6 MCU Infinity Stones can wipe out or restore half of all life in the universe, or otherwise be used as a free wish for some reason. But what do each of these stones actually do individually? Well, first up we got the Space Stone, or the Tesseract. This blue gem has the power to bend space itself, creating portals and wormholes. Whether it's S.H.I.E.L.D. or Hydra, everyone's after it for its potential in advanced tech and weaponry. Then there's the Mind Stone, which was housed in Loki's scepter. This little beauty also birthed us Vision and those cool powers the Maximoff twins wielded. But what exactly does it do on its own? Still a little bit of a head scratcher. Next up is the Aether, that's the Reality Stone. Thanos had a field day with it, turning enemies into strange shapes. Ronan was planning to use some major Xandar destruction with the Power Stone, which packs a colossal punch. Doctor Strange was known for keeping a watchful eye on the Time Stone, allowing him to peek into all those possible futures. And lastly, there's the Soul Stone. Well, that's the most mysterious of them all. It demands a hefty sacrifice, but its true power remains hidden. What's it hiding? Who frickin' knows? At number 2 is technopathy, a term you might not have heard of before. It's not some sci-fi mumbo jumbo, it's the real deal, I mean at least in the comic book realm, and it's pretty nuts. You see, our boy Tony Stark, also known as Iron Man, did more than just build that fancy suit. He's not just a tech genius anymore in the comics, he is a full-blown technopath. Now, I keep using that word, so what the heck is a technopath, you ask? Well, it's like this. Tony rewrote his DNA. Yes, his DNA, and gave himself not only a healing factor, think Wolverine without the claws, but he's now able to interface with every darn communication satellite out there using his mind. He can control pretty much any piece of technology remotely, like being the ultimate universal remote control king, except instead of changing the TV channel, he's controlling Iron Man suits and whatnot. And at number 1 is Amazo. Amazo is the android from the DC universe, which is an enigma when it comes to superpowers. Imagine being able to copy and mimic any superpower, becoming an unstoppable force. His abilities are like the ultimate power grab bag. If a superhero can fly, he could do it. If they shoot lasers from their eyes, he's got that covered too. You name it, he replicates it. But here's one interesting exception. Chaos magic. This mystical power is like his kryptonite, able to repel any attack Amazo throws at it. The only chink in this seemingly invincible armor. But the real mystery lies in the extent of his abilities. Can he replicate every single superpower in existence? Is there a limit? The mind-boggling potential of Amazo's powers keeps us guessing, making him one of the most fascinating and super-powered characters in the DC universe.
Number 10, Lactuca the Knower. Lactuca is a strange new character who I kinda love. Their powers are very interesting and unique. Lactuca in essence knows the location of everything and anything. Being considered as an Omega level mutant, as so many are in Arakko who sit on the Great Ring, Lactuca resembles a night sky, looking like a sheet covered in stars, with fabric that's made up from the cosmos. So cool! Lactuca's powers also might not seem so great in the sense that, you know, spatial awareness, while useful, isn't exactly considered powerful even when it's on a cosmic and universal scale, possibly even multiversal. Although the amount of times I've put down my phone and not known where it is, when it's even in my hand, I feel like having someone that you could just be like, yo, where's my phone? And they could be like, no, it's right there. That would be pretty useful. However, when combined with the powers of a teleporter, while still strange, Lactuca's powers could be seen as exceptionally great, because then you can just like teleport anywhere. It's crazy.
Number 9, Cypher. Cypher has what some people believe to be a pretty horrible mutant ability, especially when it comes to combat. Personally, I would kill to be able to subconsciously translate any written or spoken language, human or alien. He can also subconsciously understand body language and intention, as well as decipher codes and computer languages. After he was resurrected, and also so Marvel could make him actually useful, everything he sees is interpreted into language, basically making him able to read life. Everything I just said is strange enough, but I can wrap my head around it to some degree, I guess. But don't you dare sit here and tell me that this man can speak binary code. In New Mutants Volume 3, number 14, a guy operating a mech comes upon Cypher during a battle, and Dougie Boy speaks to the mech saying, "Hello, you don't have to do this. You know, I can set you free, show you how to think for yourself." The dude operating the mech understands him, since he's speaking English, but for some reason, the mech, which isn't artificial intelligence, also understands him, boots the operator out, and begins talking in zeros and ones. What?
Number 8. Beak. Beak is interesting in the sense that he has a physical mutation as a mutant, but one that is seemingly kinda useless. His mutation granted him wings and a beak, a bird-like appearance overall, but really these things are only an appearance alone. Beak does eventually manage to fly in the comics, but only after a long time trying to figure it out, and even then he struggles really hard to do so, and can only fly for short distances at best. So he's no angel, if you know what I mean. Beak's real strength lies in his ability to be so likable. He makes friends easily and is usually more useful in that regard. What's even stranger though is you would think this might be challenging for someone like Beak, who, you know, looks pretty abnormal. However, this seems to have the opposite effect from what you'd expect, and instead of alienating people, Beak finds it all too easy to draw people near, relate to them, and make fast friends. But hey, he's a pretty nice guy, so I suppose when you really think about it, kinda does make sense.
Number 7. Thumbelina. Christina Anderson has an ability that quite a few characters in comic books have. That would be the ability to shrink. Thumbelina can reduce herself down to about a quarter of an inch tall. That ability is perfectly fine in my eyes. Like I said, lots of characters can do this. My problem with Thumbelina, and also some other shrinkers, is how the heck do they retain their full-size strength when they get smaller? Or in Thumbelina's case, how the hell does she get stronger when she shrinks? I'm sorry to try and bring physics into any debate about superheroes and their various powers, but it makes absolutely no sense in the laws of physics that someone who is smaller can be more strong than they were when they were regular size. Ants, for example, if they were the size of a person, they would be insanely strong, as they are able to carry 20 times their body weight. So that's like an average person being able to carry like a small SUV or something. But since ants are so damn small, that means they can carry like a leaf or something. Thumbelina should not be able to knock someone out when she is a quarter of an inch tall. I'm sorry, that's all I gotta say.
Number 6. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska's powers are really cool, don't get me wrong, but how does it work exactly? I feel like we still have a lot of exploring to do with this character before we can really firmly answer that question. I've been reading Iska since she came into the comics and I'm still confused. Iska made her first appearance during the 2020 X-Men series, appearing in a tie-in issue to the X-Men crossover event 10 of Swords, which I still personally hold a great fondness for. As such, I also hold a fondness for this character, the sister-in-law to Apocalypse through his mutant wife Genesis. Iska is a mutant of the long-lost mutant island of Arakko, and her powers allow her to always win, but sometimes they also force her to always win, like against her will, and then other times, betting against her even can affect the result of a contest, even if she herself isn't involved in that. How does that work? Her powers also do not just extend to physical fights, but all means of competition. So like, if you're, I don't know, doing a coin toss with Iska, she gotta win.
Number 5. Tag. Okay, I actually kinda wish I had Brian Cruz's power. It just seems like the perfect chaos creating ability. Tag's ability, known as the Pariah effect, allows him to use a form of telepathy when he touches someone that causes the target to emit a psionic signal, which would make them a target for others to run away from or to run towards. Whichever way people would run, they would do it while being fully aware of what they're doing, but unable to control themselves. If they were being controlled to run away, they would continue to do so until they were about 100 feet away. But if the signal caused them to run towards whoever it is, then they would dogpile on top of the target. What's strange is that he could also control who was affected by the ability. Like, how? He only made one person it, so how does he decide who runs away and who doesn't? He could also make whoever was it run away from themselves. So in other words, they would just run uncontrollably and in random directions, which is actually kind of hilarious. He also would always say, "You're it," which is kind of misleading because that person can't tag someone else to make them it, which is kind of unfair as well. So.
Number 4. Dupe. Ranking a little lower for me because he's not necessarily a mutant maybe, is Dupe. Dupe is a creature who often is lumped in with the mutants, but maybe isn't one? We don't really know what Dupe is, never mind his power set. Dupe is basically an unstoppable force and has been implied to be a mutant, an alien, a mutant alien, or something else entirely. As of right now, his origin is classified on his own wiki with him being an artificial being, which really doesn't help to clarify anything. If he is a mutant, and I'm not saying conclusively that he is or that he isn't, as I still feel like his origin in general can be really contested at this point, his powers powers really are hard to classify. It's kind of like he's an old school superhero in the sense that he seems to have powers for whatever task he needs to accomplish at the time, including resurrection, the power of funk, love eyes, breaking the fourth wall, moving between panels, and even magic. Dupe has been spotted seemingly fighting alongside the mutants as recently as the AXE Judgment Day event, implying that he is at least allied with Krakoa. For those of you that don't think he's a mutant, I still kind of think he might be. Who knows?
Number 3. Hijack. The mutant known as David Bond has the oddly specific ability to control vehicular mechanisms with his thoughts. Basically, this is a form of technopathy, and he has been able to control automobiles and shield helicarriers, starting their engines, steering them, and even opening their doors. He has also been shown to be able to control high-tech suits of armor. Now, this kind of leads me to have more questions than anything else. Like, can he control motorcycles? What about bicycles? Rollerblades? Does the vehicle need to have an internal computer? What's the deal with opening and closing car doors? Does that not count as a form of telepathy? Why can he control high-tech suits of armor? What if a car has mechanical issues? Can he tell? Does the vehicle need to be in complete functioning order? Does it need to be able to turn on? I have so many questions and like no answers.
Number 2. Eyescream. Eyescream. Oh boy, what a wonderful weirdo this is. You know how much I have a strange affinity for mutants who have eye-based mutations and visual power sets if you're usually on this channel, and if you are usually on this channel, you should subscribe if you aren't already. But despite the I in Eyescream's name, he is not one of those. Instead, his mutant power seems to be that he can turn himself into ice cream. Get it? Ice cream. He's only appeared once, I believe, in the comics, making a singular appearance in a strange comic in and of itself from Marvel, Obnoxio the Clown, issue number 1. In this weird single issue, Obnoxio is a clown and he's employed to act as entertainment for a surprise birthday party at the X Mansion that is being hosted for young X-member Kitty Pryde. While this is going on, Eyescream, a villain, also appears and sneaks into the mansion, hoping to coordinate a stealthy attack on the X-Men. Instead, he ends up attempting to get Obnoxio out of the way, which he kind of succeeds in, only to later be captured in a block of ice, because he can turn into ice cream. What I want to know is, what was Eyescream's plan of attack with his power set? Is anyone on the main team featured here lactose intolerant? Was that his plan? I have to know.
Number 1. El Guapo. Tell me that someone, thanks to genetic mutation, can fold space or speak binary code or always win, and I'll look at you sideways, but I'll nod and walk away. But you tell me that some guy named Robbie Rodriguez, thanks to a genetic mutation, has no actual powers of his own, but instead has a symbiotic relationship with a superpowered flying skateboard, which followed his mental commands and sometimes even seemed to have a personality of its own or acted on his subconscious thoughts. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm done. Where did the skateboard come from? How did he discover this ability? When did this mutant power activate? Can he do this to other skateboards or inanimate objects in general? You can't just give someone the most unique and insane mutant ability and explain none of it.
Number 10. Chamber. Chamber is a weird character, but also a beloved character. Like many weirdos that I love to talk about, Chamber is also a mutant. His name is Jonathan Starsmore, and while he may actually have the potential to be considered Omega level, that doesn't make his powers any less weird. His powers relate to the fact that he is actually made out of pure psionic energy, or at least he was once his mutant powers manifested. When his powers first manifested, as a result, they blew a massive hole in his chest and his face, basically blowing off his jaw. While many people would be immensely harmed or even killed by such an occurrence, Chamber was not. Jono, as a result, no longer needed to breathe, eat, or drink, and his blood even did not need to course through his veins to keep him alive. As such, he is typically seen with a scarf or some other piece of clothing covering the lower half of his face, because it's not there anymore, and he communicates telepathically, as his jaw was blown off when his powers first emerged, so kinda hard to talk without a jaw.
Number 9. Flatman. Flatman, or Matt to his friends, is a mutant with the power of being flat and being able to stretch his limbs. He got his start working as a Mr. Fantastic impersonator at parties before eventually deciding to go into the hero business himself, joining the Great Lakes Avengers, assuming the false identity of Dr. Val Ventura. In addition to his stretching powers, Flatman can also make himself nearly invisible by turning to the side. Now, Mr. Fantastic's powers barely make any sense and are weird, but Flatman takes this to a whole new level. Unlike Mr. Fantastic, he must remain two-dimensional when using his powers, which brings up a lot of questions about the placement of his internal organs. But he is well versed in a made-up fighting style he calls Origami Fu. So, make of that what you will.
Number 8, Manifold. If you thought Lictuca was an interesting character, wait till you hear about Manifold. Although with Lictuca being newer, you may already know of Manifold because Manifold's been around for a while. But do you know how exactly his powers work? That is what is so cool, but can also be kind of confusing. Manifold is seen as a massively powerful teleporter, but the interesting thing is he actually isn't. I mean, he is really powerful, but he's not technically a teleporter. Instead, Eden Vesi's mutant powers are based in communication, specifically communication with space. He is considered a universal shaper who can basically communicate with the universe over 616 and ask it to bend and fold for him, which is how he appears to teleport himself and others such great distances. But really, it's just talking.
Number 7, Mr. Mxyzptlk. Mr. Mxyzptlk is a 5th-dimensional being who has developed an obsession with Superman, and he likes to spend his time harassing the Man of Steel and putting him through various ordeals for his own amusement. He can fly, teleport, and create essentially anything he likes just with a thought. He's also a character with cosmic awareness, sometimes speaking directly to the reader as though he's aware of his place in a comic book. A lot of his powers are explained by saying that he can manipulate reality. However, what's weird is his weakness is that if someone tricks him into saying his name backwards, he's forced to return to the 5th dimension for 90 days and undo any damage that he caused. Look, if he can do what he wants, why does that work? This is a creature that can bend reality to his will, yet he's repeatedly brought down by saying a word. Is this self-imposed? Is he just trying to be a good sport? Neither would surprise me, but the only thing I know for sure about Mr. Mxyzptlk is that nothing he does really makes sense. That's kind of the point.
Number 6, Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is known for his weird power, which when it first manifested, actually scarred the face of a young woman he happened to be making out with at the time. His power is that he has acidic vomit, which I'm not really sure how you could best utilize that, and it would definitely make for quite the hazard if you had the flu and you're feeling really nauseous. He wears a protective mouthpiece to help prevent any other dangerous cases from happening. Zeitgeist's acid vomit is powerful enough that it can actually burn through solid steel, but other than that, he is just somewhat more durable than your normal mortal human, which I guess makes sense. If you are someone who can vomit acid, you have to be fairly durable to even be able to do that and live. Axel Clooney is a mutant and used to be the leader of the X-Force at one point, but currently leads the rival team to X-Statix known as the Excellent, which also, if you aren't reading the Excellent, you should check it out.
Number 5, Gold Balls. Can you guess what Gold Balls is able to shoot out of his body? If you guessed gold balls, congratulations! Fabio Medina discovered this really odd mutant power while falling victim to a robbery in San Diego. Armed with his gold balls and his signature catchphrase, Gold Balls, Fabio took the world by storm as the newest member of the X-Men. Now, his powers don't make sense when you think about them too hard. Where are these balls coming from? How are they being formed so quickly? You know, the kind of weird stuff that applies to a lot of superheroes. But what sends Fabio into the realm of the bizarre is the fact that it was eventually discovered that the gold balls were actually infertile eggs that he was producing and shooting at people. In light of this news, Fabio retired the name Gold Balls and started calling himself Egg.
Number 4, Stone Boy. I think it says it all when you belong to a team with the words Substitute Heroes in the title. Dag Wentum is known as Stone Boy, and he belongs to the team known as the Legion of Substitute Heroes. He is an alien from the planet Zwen who can transform into a stone form, becoming super strong and super durable, but also immediately it makes him unable to move, rendering him completely immobile. Yeah, so not super useful in combat if you want to like actually do anything or beat someone, but pretty useful I guess if you just want to survive? Let me put it another way. Stone Boy also has not been spotted since the New Earth continuity existed. I think that tells you just how ridiculous his abilities are. So ridiculous that we can't even seem to find a place for him in the massive universe that is the Prime Earth continuity. And this is even after he finally manages to gain some ability in a possible future to move somewhat while in his stone form, post 0 hour that is.
Number 3, 3D Man. When the Skrulls abducted test pilot Chuck Chandler, the human proved more wily to deal with than they anticipated. He tried to escape on his rocket plane, but accidentally caused an explosion that destroyed both the Skrull ship and Chuck. Bizarrely, Chuck's brother Hal witnessed the explosion, which caused Chuck to become a two-dimensional being living in Hal's glasses, imprinting an image of Chuck in each lens. If you think that doesn't make much sense, just you wait. When Hal wears the glasses and concentrates really hard, he can merge the two images of his brother, causing Chuck to emerge as the 3D man. When freed from the glasses, 3D man has 3 times his normal physical abilities because, you know, 3D. As an extra bonus, Hal falls into a coma every time 3D man comes out of his glasses, only waking back up when his brother returns to the glasses. This is a confusing and convoluted gimmick that doesn't really seem worth it if all it does is free a hero who's not particularly useful. Also, the name 3D Man must be confusing for characters who don't know every detail about his life. I mean, most things are in 3D, right?
Number 2, Arm Falloff Boy. Arm Falloff Boy has to be one of the weirdest ones out there. Unlike another odd hero, Bouncing Boy, who eventually in the Prime Earth continuity achieved his dream, Arm Falloff Boy has never made the cut for the Legion of Superheroes. And that's saying something, considering that the Legion of Superheroes themselves are kind of a weird superhero team by all definitions. Arm Falloff Boy has the power to detach his limbs, which he typically then attempts to use to beat his enemies with. I mean, it's pretty cool that he can remove his limbs and survive, but it's less cool that really all he does from there is use his arm or his leg as a weapon. Especially as this means he now has less limbs to like move himself with in combat, so that's really pretty silly. And so is the onomatopoeia that is often used to describe the sound of his power. Plorp. What a great onomatopoeia.
Number 1. Fluff. First appearing in excellent number 3, Fluff probably takes the cake for having the most confusing, disgusting, and odd power I've seen in a long time. Fluff is able to generate bucket loads of belly button lint at will and vary its chemical composition. Now first off, ew. Secondly, belly button lint is just stray clothing fibers that come off of your clothes and collect in your belly button. Trust me, I know. Fluff wears a costume with a very deep V, which allows his navel to feel those sweet summer breezes, which means that he wouldn't have any belly button lint, which begs the question, what exactly is he shooting out of his little tum-tum? You're free to speculate in the comments, but I refuse to give this character one more second of thought. Number 10. Tattooed Man. Mark Richards was a former Marine who was presumed dead before showing up in Gotham as a killer for hire with the ability to make his tattoos come to life as projections, which then attack his enemies. He explains his powers as being due to a magic process called sin grafting, which takes the sins of his victims and makes them into tattoo monsters. Now, that's comic booky and fun, but that's also incredibly vague. Why are sins turning into tattoos? Which sins are worth a tattoo monster? I don't know, it's just weird to me that none of the heroes or villains he comes across ever seem to ask any follow-up questions. Number 9. The Fisherman. Fisherman is an Aquaman villain who often works as a smuggler, running weapons to Atlantean rebels and using trained dolphins to run drugs into France. He uses a large fishing pole with super strong fishing line to attack and tie up his enemies, as well as a series of specialized lures that blow up or shoot gases at his enemies. Dumb, but pretty straightforward. What makes him so confusing is that it has since been revealed that his helmet is actually a sentient parasite that takes over their host's mind and makes them commit fishing-related crimes. Kind of like if Venom was a retired dad. What I don't get about this is why would a parasite give its host the ability to be good at fishing? Was the parasite formed in a Bass Pro Shop? Backstory and the theme of this villain just do not match. In case you're thinking, maybe it was the host's idea to go with the hobbyist theme. Each time the parasite has bonded with a new host, that person has also taken on the identity of the fisherman. So it is the parasite's choice to continue with the fisherman theme. Number 8. Swarm. Fritz von Meyer was a Nazi scientist who came across an irradiated beehive and began experimenting on the bees, hoping that he would be able to control them to do his bidding. The experiment went wrong and the bees turned on him, devouring Fritz. As he was eaten by the bees, his consciousness was spread between all the bees in the hive. So he was granted control of the bees, but at a weird, twisty cost. He uses this ability to control bees, to form them into a body-like shape, and tries to cleanse the earth of all humans. He can also form other shapes out of bees and use them to attack people. I don't get it. I mean, radioactive or not, why would getting eaten by bees, who only eat pollen by the way, cause you to become a hive mind? Look, he's a very visually interesting villain, but he raises a lot more questions than he answers. Number 7. Forget-Me-Not. Not to be confused with the other Marvel character with the same superhero name who controls pheromones to make men fall in love with her, Poison Ivy style. Zabi has what could allegedly be called the power to be immediately forgotten by anyone he meets as soon as he leaves their field of vision. He was a member of the X-Men, although none of his teammates were aware of this most of the time. In fact, Professor X had to set up a psychic reminder to remind him once every hour that Forget-Me-Not existed. He had his uses and was especially good at reconnaissance missions, but once Xavier died, he became depressed and left the team. They didn't notice, despite the fact that he gave the eulogy. In the years since, he has taken up work on the mutant island nation of Krakoa as a detective, partnered with the Juggernaut. They make a good team considering that Juggernaut never remembers that he has a partner. Number 6. Polka Dot Man. Although he doesn't technically have superpowers, this villain's gimmick is too confusing not to get into. Polka Dot Man commits crimes by tearing off the various colored dots on his costume, throwing them, and then letting them expand and morph into the various gadgets that he needs. For example, he can tear a dot off, transform it into a buzzsaw blade, and throw it at Batman and Robin as he escapes on a flying saucer, as he does in his first appearance in Detective Comics number 300. Well, I can suspend my belief when I see Batman pull whatever he needs out of his utility belt. The idea of Polka Dot Man being able to carry around full vehicles on his costume is just too much. What makes it even more confusing is we've never received any explanation for how this works. His origin and powers were altered and frankly improved in the live-action adaptation of The Suicide Squad, where it was revealed that his mother had been a scientist at Star Labs who had exposed him to an alien virus in an attempt to give him superpowers. This resulted in him being able to cast glowing colored dots that destroyed whatever they came into contact with. Number 5. Video Man. Video Man first appeared in Spider-Man Family featuring Amazing Friends number 1. He is a giant, two-dimensional, 8-bit creature that only yells video game phrases like "Destroy all combatants!" He can shoot energy blasts from his arms that can blow up whatever they hit, which I can get on board with. But what makes him so confusing is that we're given zero context or explanation as to who or what he is or where he comes from. He just shows up and attacks Spider-Man and Iceman. At first I thought maybe he'd actually escape from an arcade game, but once he's destroyed, the heroes discover an internal processor unit, which implies that he was created by someone and designed for the purpose of destruction. But who created him? More importantly, how did they create him? Will we ever find out in another appearance? No, because he never showed up again. Number 4. Hammerhead. Former mob hitman who was critically injured on a job gone wrong. Hammerhead was taken into surgery and given a steel alloy plate, which gave his head its distinctive odd appearance. Although this barely qualifies as a power, he is known to attack his enemies by literally charging headfirst into them. He regularly smashes his head into walls and takes blows to the head from Spider-Man, seemingly brushing them off due to the metal plate on his head. This makes no sense if you know anything about how concussions work. In extremely basic terms, a concussion is caused when your head gets hit and your brain bangs against the inside of your skull, thus damaging your brain. So, even if the steel plate prevents Hammerhead's skull from breaking, the sudden shock of smashing into a wall or taking a punch from a superhero with the proportionate strength of a spider would still cause him severe brain damage. It's why football players get concussions despite wearing helmets. Even once Hammerhead's brain was transferred into an adamantium skeleton by Mr. Negative, this same weakness would remain, as unlike vibranium, adamantium does not absorb the force of a blow. Number 3. Ruby Thursday. For some reason, Thursday Rubenstein thought it would be a good idea to replace her head with a red orb that can reshape itself into dangerous tentacles and spikes. She used these abilities to fight the Defenders as a member of the head-themed supervillain group known as the Headmen. Other abilities of the big red candy apple she calls a head are the ability to fire energy blasts and explode and reform. When concentrating really hard, she can also make the head take the form of a normal red-headed woman. Now, clearly nothing about Ruby Thursday makes sense, but this is the thing that really makes me scratch my head. Why is it harder for her to make the orb look like a head than it is for her to make it explode and reform. Come to think of it, why didn't she just make the head look normal to begin with? Number 2, Bizarro. A Superman villain with several different origins, sometimes being a clone, sometimes being from an alternate dimension, and sometimes being a duplicate created by the Joker when he had the ability to alter reality. Bizarro's deal is that he's the opposite of Superman in every way, including his speech. For example, if he was hungry, he would express this by saying something like, "Bizarro am full and no want pizza." He has superpowers, but in true Bizarro fashion, they manifest themselves as backwards versions of Superman's. So instead of heat vision and Arctic breath, Bizarro shoots ice beams out of his eyes and blows fire. What makes Bizarro's powers so confusing is the inconsistency that comes with them. His whole gimmick is supposed to be that he has the opposite powers of Superman, yet unlike Superman, he still has super strength and speed. You might think that I'm reading too much into this, but in All-Star Superman number 8, when Superman visits the Bizarro world, he sees a Bizarro version of the Flash, who boasts that he has a top speed of 2 inches per hour. So, by this logic, Bizarro should be weak and unable to fly, yet he still manages to consistently hold his own in fights with Superman. As Bizarro would put it, that makes perfect sense. Number 1, Kangaroo. When he was a child, Frank Oliver was obsessed with kangaroos. He would study them from a distance and even spent time living among them so that he could learn to mimic their abilities. When he grew up, he became a criminal who used his jumping abilities to commit robberies and then leap away like a kangaroo. Although he was later given augmentations that heightened his abilities, in his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 81, he's just a normal human who can jump like a kangaroo. That's a bit far-fetched, even for a comic book. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he studied kangaroos so well that he learned to jump just as well as them. It still doesn't add up. Let's crunch some numbers. A kangaroo can leap a distance of about 25 feet, which is undeniably impressive. Now, the long jump world record is around 29 feet, so it is conceivable that a human could accomplish that. However, the maximum height a kangaroo can jump is 6 feet, yet in his first appearance, we see Frank consistently and easily leaping at least 15 feet high. For reference, the current high jump world record is just over 8 feet. That would be impossible for a kangaroo, let alone some regular Australian dude.
Coming in at number 10 is Iska the Unbeaten. This spot could as easily been taken by Domino, as Iska also has a form of limited psychokinesis, which is probability manipulation, or also known as the power of luck, which is probably one of the most unexplainable powers because we can't even say that luck is for sure a real thing. But Iska takes it one step further into ridiculousness with the power of being literally unable to lose. Iska has the power to always win, no matter what, whether that is individual one-on-one contests, votes, or wagers, or larger battles where she is a member of a group. In contests of skill, her powers might give her the talent she needs to win, or she might just win through, quote, improbable circumstances. In larger battles or wars, her powers detect the probability of both sides winning and have literally led her to defect from the losing side and join the winning side, meaning she still personally wins. It's not that we don't understand it, it's that it can't even properly be explained without sounding utterly ridiculous. Love Iska the Unbeaten though, great character. Number 9, Rainbow Girl. She is the first superpowered individual on this list affiliated with the Legion of Superheroes, but she definitely won't be the last. The team seems to be just a sticky flytrap for all the random and wacky superheroes out there in the universe. Unlike some others though, Rainbow Girl didn't actually make it onto that team, as her powers were deemed not useful enough. Instead, she made it onto the Legion of Substitute Heroes, which I'm assuming is the Legion that villains either don't listen to, or the Legion that just puts on a movie for villains to watch instead of just teaching them. I mean, fighting them. Anyways, why is Rainbow Girl useless? Well, she can harness the emotional spectrum. Red for rage, orange for green, yellow for fear, green for will, blue for hope, indigo for compassion, and violet for love. But unlike the Lanterns, she has no ring to use the power through, and she cycles through the colors impulsively, meaning it leads to terrible mood swings. Number 8, Odyssey. Wonder Woman Odyssey feels almost like a DC Elseworlds story, like it shouldn't fit into the main timeline, which itself is pretty damn confusing because, guess what? It definitely is not an Elseworlds story. Odyssey was another of DC's attempts to reboot Wonder Woman, erasing all the continuity that had been in the series since Crisis on Infinite Earths, giving us a Diana who had no connection to anyone that she had been interacting with for years in the comic books. The story it tells is not too convoluted itself. It drops us into the middle of the action, making it feel like we've missed a good chunk of the story, but it goes on to tell a pretty linear line of storytelling. It's just so disjointed from the rest of pretty much anything else. But then it was basically completely unnecessary because the same year that Odyssey ended, the entire DC universe was rebooted with Flashpoint and the New 52, with nothing about Diana's new reboot being carried over. Number 7. Matter Eater Lad. Honestly, Tensel Chem's power, one shared by his whole race, gives me more questions than it gives me answers. Matter Eater Lad's main shtick is that he can eat any substance of matter in any form, solid, liquid, or gas, in any amount at super speed. Bismalians, which are his race, come from a planet where over time microbes made regular food inedible. In turn, their species evolved to be able to eat any form of matter thanks to producing a variety of digestive enzymes that act on specific substances, making them easier to chew and digest. Bismalians can also metabolize food almost instantly, and if they gotta, they can consume tons of food in minutes. So where I am left confused is exactly where all that stuff goes. Not to get like too into it here, but what's Tensel's bathroom situation like? Also dental. I'm assuming their teeth are of a denser material than human teeth. One Bismalian who was part of the Yellow Lanterns ate people, which caused him to get his teeth removed as punishment, but he then had those replaced with Bismalian steel, allowing him to bite through almost anything. So my question is, could he not bite through anything before? Also, if Tensel eats a whole asteroid, which he has done before, where does he poop? I just have so many questions and like no answers. I would just one answer. Number 6, the Flash. Wally West is easily the fastest of all the speedsters out there. He has an almost spiritual connection to the Speed Force that allows him to do a great number of things, from traveling time to creating electrical energy constructs. Thanks to a heart condition, Wally has even been able to freeze time, which basically allows him to move at super speed without actually moving at super speed. And if you can explain exactly how that works to me, I will give you $1 single. That's all I got. The Speed Force is basically time, the representation of reality in motion, being the very cosmic force that pushes space and time forward. So how is it that people can hold chunks of it, or create lightning constructs with it, or absorb speed and momentum from other people or things? As a concept for time and a cosmic force, it is really hard to both wrap your head around it and explain the Speed Force and all the things that speedsters like Wally West and Barry Allen are able to do with it. You kind of just have to accept that this is what it is. Number 5, the Hulk. Everyone knows Hulk's ability to turn into a big old green monster and rip things apart with a strength that increases based on his anger. But what many of you may not know is that Hulk actually possesses a much more subtle ability to see astral projections and ghosts and even interact with them if he chooses. Hulk's astral form perception has come in handy when working with Doctor Strange as a defender. But why does Hulk have this ability? Well, Bruce Banner subconsciously feared his father's ghost would come back to haunt him, like literally come back to haunt him. And so the Hulk just developed this mechanism to allow him to look out for that ghost, and I guess other ghosts as well. There isn't really more to it. Hulk just developed the ability that is something usually reserved for telepaths. For the super intelligent Bruce Banner, it would make a bit more sense, but it's been suggested that for Bruce, the clarity of the astral forms is diminished when compared to the telepathically resistant Hulk's ability to view them. With Immortal Hulk and the connection to the One Below All, perhaps that could serve as some kind of fan explanation, but we don't have a real one, so no. Number 4, Jin Genie. Jin Genie was a mutant, but unlike almost any other mutant ever, her powers were directly dependent on how much alcohol she consumed. Becca Parker had the power to generate seismic vibrations proportionate to her amount of alcoholic intake. As you can imagine, being intoxicated in order to use your superpowers can be rather interesting. It seems like one of those things you should add to the list of things you shouldn't do while under the influence. Like, don't drive, don't operate heavy machinery, don't use your superpowers to cause seismic vibrations. that kind of thing. Unfortunately, we do not get to see her use her powers that much, or get an explanation for why alcohol fuels said powers, because Jin Genie is de-lifed in the same comic that she was introduced in, X-Force number 116 in July 2001. Number 3, Superman. Back in the day, while Superman was a fairly new being, he would kind of have whatever superpower he wanted / needed at the time, until eventually his set table of powers was established. But there is one new power that appeared in 1958, Superman number 125, where Superman learned to fire a tiny version of himself out of his hands. After discovering a tiny spaceship that blows up in his face, Superman loses all of his abilities minus, interestingly, his invulnerability. Luckily, he gained the ability to literally fire a doll-sized version of himself out of his hand that had all of his powers and would go and beat up criminals or melt icebergs. What's hilarious is that Superman even got jealous of the little mini him. When a guided missile was on its way to the Eiffel Tower, he sent out his little buddy and an onlooker shouted, "How cute!" To which he said, "Cute? What nonsense!" Fortunately for Superman, his mini-me was destroyed by a kryptonite meteorite and Superman's powers were restored to him. Number 2, Color Kid. Ulu Vac from the planet Lupra is the hero known as Color Kid, and his name does indeed suit his abilities. Vac was struck by a multicolored beam of light from another dimension that granted him the incredible power to alter the color of objects and people, and that is literally all he can do. It's stated that this power is probably caused by him changing the spectrum of light around the person or thing, but there are no real explanations given. It also does absolutely nothing for him or anyone else. Color Kid decided to use this power to go and audition to be a member of the Legion of Superheroes, and what do you know, he was rejected from the team and his powers were deemed useless. While it may be true, it feels a little bit mean, but at least he got in with the Legion of Substitute Heroes, so there's that. And in at number 1 is El Guapo. Robbie Rodriguez, who goes by El Guapo, is a mutant from the Marvel Universe. But that kind of opens up a whole bunch of questions because Robbie doesn't seem to have any powers of his own, unless you consider his symbiotic relationship with his flying skateboard a superpower. His wiki page refers to this as a idiosyncratic manipulation, suggesting that Robbie actually has total control over his skateboard. But the problem with that statement is that his skateboard also acted with a mind of its own, like when it beat him up for cheating on his girlfriend. Now, an argument could be made that perhaps it's his own subconsciousness beating himself up for doing the wrong thing, but that's just a me theory, and Marvel did not state this to be true or even explain his ability at all, really. It's not telekinesis, and the board seems to have a mind of its own. I don't know, you tell me what you think.
Number 10, 3D Man. Okay, we're gonna start this one out on a trippy note. Meet Charles Chandler. He entered Marvel Comics back in 1977 in Marvel Premiere issue 35. He's an American test pilot who got his powers from radiation after an explosion while escaping Skrulls. Now, Charlie was consumed by radiation and his brother Hal had to witness the entire thing. Super tragic. Now, the explosion imprinted an image of Charlie onto Hal's glasses. So now if Hal focuses hard enough, he can project Charlie back into existence as this man, this 3D man. Now Hal would fall into a coma when this happens, and over time the brothers would swap on who's actually controlling the 3D man. Mind you, the 3D man is 3 times stronger than the average human being, but he's also 3 times as confusing, because none of these powers should make sense in any way. And before we continue on with this trippy list, guys, if you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up right at the bottom, that would be awesome. And if you haven't already subscribed, you're here, you're watching, click that while you're at it, and then we can be friends. You guys are the best. Now let's get right back into the video. Number 9, Stone Boy. Dag Wentham is not from Earth, first of all. He's actually from the planet Zwen as a member of the Legion of the Substitute Heroes. He made his DC Comics debut with Adventure Comics issue 306. He comes out of the gate hot. He comes out confident. He calls himself Stone Boy because he can turn himself into solid stone. But the Legionnaires said my power was too static and would accomplish nothing positive. Watch me change. I mean, we didn't need the last 80% of that, but they're also not wrong. Your powers are amazing, but you can't really do much. He just turns to stone. The team uses him by dropping him as a stone on the head of their enemies. That's like when you're playing Smash Bros and your friend picks Kirby and all they do is just float above and then smash down on you. You're like, really? Can we just fight? I'm that person, I'm that friend. So this ability came because his homeworld would rotate so slowly that the nights are half of a year long. So they evolved super suspended animation. Hypnotic suggestion is the reason he can wake up, but how does any of this even happen? It's not even explained. Does it hurt? Is it itchy? Oh, it must be so itchy. Number 8, Matter Eater Lad. Matter Eater Lad, okay, he comes from the planet Bismol, not like Pepto-Bismol, which you may think it should be after reading this, where microbes made their food inedible and the population soon had to evolve or starve. Now they didn't turn into farmers, they didn't create new food, they did however gain the ability to eat any and all matter. So now we have Matter Eater Lad, aka Tenzil Chem. He was part of that same crew with Sunboy and Stoneboy, you know, that fantastic Stoneboy we just talked about. The dude introduces himself to the team when he eats an old ray gun. He even says yum yum, like he likes the taste of an old ray gun. The team actually decides to use them. They're like, okay, well he could just literally eat our way to freedom. And then even in the thought bubble, it shows him like eating a jail cell and they're like, yeah, he's not wrong. It's pretty, we could use him. And then Tenzil even says, I know what's on your mind. I'm unusual. I don't qualify. No, Tenzil, what's on our mind is where does that food go after you yum yum eat it? Like I'm no doctor, but an old ray gun, that can't feel good coming out. He's like, hey guys, look how many thumbtacks I can eat. The whole team's like, no, Tenzil, wait, no. Number 7, Multiple Man. James Madrox. He made his first appearance in Giant Size Fantastic Four issue 4, and his ability you probably just know by his name. He can make duplicates. He wasn't used very much in the X-Men, and he spent most of his days with X-Factor. Now, his powers may seem weak compared to gods and wizards, but this guy makes me ask a lot of questions, because at one point, James had 40 of him. There are 40 James running around town. That's a lot of James. So the duplicates feel, think, and act independently, but they're guided by the original James. So each of these duplicates manifests one aspect of James' personality, and the longer that they're away from the OG James, the more those traits become extreme. And if one of these duplicates passed away, he can sense the general area where the body is. But there's a logic question to be asked here. Like, for example, if he eats a handful of diamonds and then multiplies into 40 James, and then all those James did the Mama Bird method and, you know, puked up those diamonds, do they all have the same contents inside their stomach? Do we just make more diamonds? If so, we may have figured out a really gross solution to a lot of problems. Number 6, Swarm. Okay, meet Fritz von Meyer. He made his debut in Champions issue 14 back in 1977. And as you could probably guess by his name, he's a swarm of bees. How terrifying is that? He's made of 1,000 bees. This goes back to that one day where he was still just a German beekeeper and he found a beehive that was unlike any other hive he had seen. So he made a device that he hoped would reawaken these bees. And originally he thought that these bees were an end result of a mutation with a nearby fallen meteorite. So he was pumped about it. These were unique bees after all, because when he tried to capture the queen bee, the others just devoured him. They ate him. There were only bones left over. But now these bees were so special because now his consciousness was spread out throughout all of these thousands of bees, and now you have the scariest villain ever. Just a man made of bees. Here, take my wallet, take my phone, whatever you want. Yeah, you're made of bees. I'm not gonna fight you. No way I'm throwing hands with 1,000 bees. Get out of town. Also, that must be extremely hard to do. I mean, he makes himself look like the shape of a human. That's extreme coordination. Number 5, Arm Fall Off Boy. He made his first appearance in Secret Origins Volume 2, issue 46. His real name isn't even known, so now we have to call him Arm Fallout Boy. I mean, Fall Off Boy. His powers are just that. He can take his arms off and use them as weapons. Now, he tried to enlist as a member of the Legion of Superheroes, but was rejected. He was actually the first reject. Matter Eater Lad said that he got these oddly specific powers because he was careless when holding the anti-gravity metal element 152, but it's hard to tell if he was serious. His arms aren't robotic arms, like Bucky Barnes, for example. His arm can actually come off and then you can use it as a metal weapon. Sure, that's great, but it doesn't make a plorp sound, you know? So he takes his own arm off, hits people with his wet shoulder blade, and then just plorps it back on. Wouldn't it be damaged? Also, would he feel the pain as soon as he connected it back to his body and his brain? All the questions. Also, ew. Number 4, Songbird. Melissa Gold made her comic book debut in The Incredible Hulk issue 449. She ran away from her parents at a young age, and whilst developing a hard knock life attitude, she ended up becoming a professional wrestler, giving herself the stage name Screaming Mimi, and then soon joined the wrestling group Grapplers. So the Grapplers were doing great, they were killing it, but they weren't making the same amount of money as the male wrestlers. So they had to take on a new job now, with the Roxxon Oil Company. Now because of Quasar, the mission went horribly and the Grapplers were tried and jailed. Melissa was given vocal cord implants that provided her with acoustic kinesis, hence her first nickname, Screaming Mimi. She can make all these crazy weapons with her voice as well, and even has the ability to craft herself wings with her voice and fly. somehow. She joined the Masters of Evil in Avengers issue 271, but when she could no longer use her powers, Zemo came in with his accomplice, the Fixer, and gave her new powers with neck implants. Her sound energy is pretty cool, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean, she can create solid weapons and force fields, and she can even go as far as to make herself undetectable by others. Fascinating, yes. Confusing. Also yes. Number 3, Bouncing Boy. He made a spectacular arrival to Action Comics in issue 276. He's a member of that legion of superheroes that I keep mentioning. So yes, this guy made it through, and the dude who used his arm as a Nerf bat was rejected. What a world, okay. So Chuck Tane was born on Earth, and he has this unique ability where he can inflate like a beach ball and bounce around. The combination of invulnerability and velocity makes him quite the unit. He got these powers by accidentally drinking a super plastic formula that he thought was soda pop. Does he have to be round? Does he have to bounce around? I feel like his powers are not really specific here. If he's strong and unstoppable, can he just inflate himself a little bit and then fight like a normal person? Like, can he make his fist into extreme sock and boppers and then boing, like they'll bounce away, and then boing, and they'll bounce away? It was a little bit better than being a beach ball than bouncing around like that chick from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That sounds like a nightmare. You get a lot more done than being the beach ball of doom, is all I'm saying. Number 2, Jin Genie. Becca Parker was one of the X-Force members. She was introduced in issue 116. Her powers don't make a lot of sense, but they're so fun and specific that I have to talk about her. So the more alcohol in her system she has, the more powerful she becomes. She probably kills it at holiday office parties, eh? Wow. She's the first one going home at like 9 p.m. You're like, really? Oh, Jin Genie, that makes sense. Jin Genie has the power to generate seismic vibrations depending on how much she drinks. Now, it's not specified how this works. Are we talking about the amount you drink or the percentages? Because this one, we could maybe find a solution in time. Finally, number 1, Animal Vegetable Mineral Man. So as crazy as his name sounds, that's just it. He made his first debut in DC Comics with Doom Patrol issue 89. Swedish scientist Sven Larsson gained these incredible powers after falling into a vat of mysterious amino acids. So now he can change any part of his body into any animal, any vegetable, or any mineral. And he can do them at the same time. It doesn't have to be one of them. It can be all of them at the same time and on different body parts. How insane and overpowered is that?
Spotlight is on Steve Larson, also known as Animal Vegetable Mineral Man. He was attacked by his secondary dinosaur head during a robbery gone wrong.
So not only does this not make any sense at all, but this is insane. This guy should never lose a fight. The possibilities are literally endless. The fact that he can somehow control all 3 at the same time as well, like your mind must be amazing.
Number 10, the Phantom Stranger. The Phantom Stranger comes from the DC universe and is a character that is, well, very mysterious. I mean, his true origins have never been technically revealed. He has a lot of powers and is said to be one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe. His powers include immortality, spell casting, illusion casting, reality manipulation, teleportation, dimensional travel, mental awareness, transmutation, and spectral sight. It's a lot. No one knows where he has gotten all these powers though. Well, not officially, that is. He has had a few different origins over the years. One was that he was a fallen angel who decided to stay neutral during Lucifer's rebellion against heaven. Another theory is that he is a remnant of a dead universe. Another is that he was a man named Isaac who had a wife and daughter around the time, when Jesus would have been a child. When the king sent out soldiers to kill all the young male kids in an attempt to kill Jesus. Unfortunately, some of the casualties were his wife and son. He then blamed Jesus for this. He tried to take revenge on him, and because of this, Jesus sent him to walk the earth until doomsday. And another one was that he was alive during biblical times, and that one day he tried to commit suicide, but angels did not allow it. They stopped him from entering the afterlife and forced him to walk the earth for eternity, which showed him what he was meant to do: turn away humanity from evil. So, Phantom Stranger is a bit confusing, but that doesn't make him any less cool. Number 9, Legion. David is a very powerful mutant. He's the son of Charles Xavier, aka Professor X. Now, it would be kind of impossible to list all of his powers because, well, he has so many, with more being added all the time. How is this possible? Well, let me explain. You see, David is an Omega level mutant with dissociative identity disorder, which means he has multiple personalities. Each of these personalities have their own abilities. So, one has telekinesis, while another has super strength, while another can shoot acid gas, while another can teleport. Another can warp reality, and the list goes on and on. At one point, Rogue said while she was trapped inside of Legion that she saw thousands of personalities, all with unique powers. and more being created every single day. It's kind of crazy and almost makes him an unstoppable character, although being able to control and tap into those abilities is another thing entirely. Number 8. Hope Summers. Hope Summers is the daughter of Nathan Summers, aka Cable. She was born during a time when, well, mutants weren't supposed to be born, which is why a lot of people call her the Mutant Messiah. Now, Hope has the power of the Phoenix Force. Now, Hope has had the power of the Phoenix Force at one point, but that is not what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about what her powers are on her own. You see, she has the power of superpower manipulation. Basically, she can control any power of a mutant that's around her. Now, when Hope was born, Cerebro detected her and then blew up, like she straight up destroyed it. Why? Well, I mean, that was never 100% clear, but people say it's because how powerful she was. Regardless, it happened and it was a really big deal. After that, she couldn't be detected by any mutant detecting equipment. So now that leaves a lot of fans asking if she is even a mutant at all, which makes things even more complicated. Number 7, Longneck. Longneck, also known as William Hanover, is a mutant who made his first and only appearance during New X-Men issue 140. He was one of the mutants that ended up losing his powers during M-Day. His powers are very weird and don't really make a lot of sense. He has a long neck. That's literally it. Why is that his power? And what purpose does it really serve is anyone's guess. The character hasn't shown up again since, so at this point all we can do is theorize about it. What do you guys think Longneck can do with his powers? Put those theories down below. We need to figure this out. Number 6, Quire. Irana Clayton is a mutant, also known as Quire. She first appeared in New X-Men issue 119. Her power is that she has 3 extra mouths all over her neck, and these mouths can make her sound different, or even make her sound like she's talking in a completely different location. I mean, that could be useful in certain scenarios, but not really overall. She ended up losing her powers later on because of what a Scarlet Witch did on M-Day, so she really doesn't have to worry about, using them anymore. But still, that doesn't really stop us from wondering what the point of that power really was. Number 5, Spider-Man. Spider-Man is one of the greatest superheroes of all time, but there has always been one thing about his powers that has confused fans over the years: his spider sense. To this day, people consider it to be one of his most inconsistent abilities, mostly because different writers have different ideas of how it works. Sometimes they can let him know exactly where danger is, other times he has no idea why it's going off, or knows why, but doesn't know where the danger is coming from. I mean, he has been able to dodge bullets or dodge attacks from behind, yet other times someone will just sneak up on him and he has no idea. Even in the films, it's been a source of debate. But this really all comes down to whoever is writing him. They just have different approaches to this specific ability. Number 4, Scarlet Witch. Wanda is one of the most powerful heroes in both the comics and the MCU. In the comics, she uses a form of chaos magic, in which she can warp reality. But in the films, her powers came from an Infinity Stone. In both versions, we still don't know exactly how her powers work. We know she uses magic, but the full extent of her powers is never really fully explained. She can wipe out almost the entire mutant population in the comics or almost kill Thanos in the films. Reality warping is a near limitless power, so technically with us only knowing that, she could essentially do anything. Scarlet Witch is such an amazing character in both the comics and films, so hopefully one day we learn a little bit more about her overall abilities. Number 3, Daredevil. Matt Murdock, the lawyer from Hell's Kitchen, and part of a show that was cancelled way too soon. So, Daredevil actually has a similar problem to Spider-Man. His abilities have always been a bit inconsistent, specifically his radar sense. So, when Matt lost his sight, his other senses were all enhanced, to the point where he could technically see because his other senses were supercharged. They would create a picture of the world around him. But over the course of his superhero history, it has become a very inconsistent ability. Sometimes it can show him everything, other times not so much. Even in the TV show, which is amazing, it kind of changed from season to season, depending on the scenario. Although it did feel like they had a better grasp on it in the end, but unfortunately we will never see how that would have continued. Number 2, Superman. Superman has a lot of powers. Some of them are very straightforward, while others are really not. For example, in the Superman film series, he was able to wipe away some of Lois's memories with a kiss, which people, call the amnesia kiss. Also, in Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, he was fighting Nuclear Man, and when Nuclear Man ends up destroying some of the Great Wall of China. Also, in Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, he was fighting Nuclear Man. and Nuclear Man destroys some of the Great Wall of China. So, Superman is able to repair it with his eyes. And I am not joking. Outside of his heat vision, he has repair broken structures vision. Like, where was this in all the other films? He just learned it now? Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And that's not all. In the Silver Age Superman comics, Superman was able to create a miniature clone of himself that he shot out of his own hand. And this clone possessed all of his powers. Like, what? It doesn't really make any sense. And they ended up scrapping the idea later on because it never shows up again. Thank goodness. Number 1, the Sentry. The Sentry. People call him Marvel's Superman, but that really couldn't be farther from the truth. Aside from the S on his costume, they are nothing alike. Robert Reynolds is a complex character. He is not fully on one side. He has been a hero and a villain. His powers are limitless. He has super strength, super speed, invulnerability, regeneration, invisibility, matter manipulation, shapeshifting, telekinesis, telepathy, healing, and the list goes on and on. Nothing can kill him. I mean, he's even flown into the sun and he was just okay. He fought the Hulk and won. The dude is so powerful that even the smartest people in the Marvel Universe haven't found a way to actually kill him for good. Alright, there you have it guys, the top 10 scary superhero powers that no one understands. What does your list look like? Let us know down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to Top 10 Nerds so you never miss one nerdy moment. I'm your host, Taylor Raff, and thank you so much for watching.